The advertisement in the Denver newspaper had been simple enough. Cook needed for winter months on cattle ranch in southern Colorado, room and board provided, wages fair. And Delilah Owens had folded the paper with trembling hands, knowing this might be her only chance to escape the boarding house where creditors were beginning to circle like vultures over her late husband's unpaid debts. She arrived in Manassas, Colorado on a bitter November afternoon in 1884, her threadbare coat doing little against the wind that swept down from the San Juan Mountains, carrying with it the promise of a harsh winter ahead. The town itself was small, just a handful of wooden buildings clustered along a dirt road, with mountains rising like sentinels in the distance. Delilah clutched her single carpetbag and waited outside the general store as instructed, watching her breath form white clouds in the frigid air. Zachariah Anderson arrived 20 minutes later, driving a wagon pulled by 2 sturdy horses, their coats already thick with winter fur. He climbed down slowly, a tall man in his early 30s with dark hair that needed cutting and eyes the color of storm clouds. His face was weathered from years under the sun, lines carved deep around his mouth and eyes, but there was something gentle in the way he approached her, removing his hat despite the cold. "Mrs. Owens." His voice was deep, roughened by wind and sparse use. "Yes, Mr. Anderson, I presume." Delilah straightened her spine, determined not to show how nervous she felt. She was 26 years old, a widow of 8 months, and this position represented the difference between survival and destitution. "Just Zach, madam. Let me take your bag." He reached for the worn carpetbag, and she noticed his hands were calloused, scarred across the knuckles. Ranch hands, she thought, working hands. "It's about an hour's ride to the ranch. I brought extra blankets." The journey into the high valley where his ranch sat nestled against the foothills gave Delilah time to observe her new employer. He spoke little, pointing out landmarks occasionally, his attention mostly on the road and the darkening sky. Snow had begun to fall, light flakes that melted as soon as they touched the ground, but she could sense heavier weather coming. "How long have you had the ranch?" she asked, needing to fill the silence with something. 12 years. Built most of it myself with help from my brother." He paused, jaw tightening. "He died 3 years ago, fever." "I am sorry for your loss." Zach nodded but said nothing more. Delilah understood grief that made words feel inadequate. Her own husband had been killed in a railroad accident, leaving her with nothing but bills and the revelation that the man she had married was not who she thought he was. Thomas Owens had been charming and persuasive, and entirely reckless with money that was not his own. The ranch house appeared as the sun touched the western peaks, painting the snow-dusted mountains gold and crimson. It was larger than she had expected, a 2-story structure built of logs and stone, with a wide porch wrapping around the front and side. Smoke rose from the chimney, a welcoming sign of warmth. Behind the house stood a massive barn, several outbuildings, and an extensive system of corrals and fencing. "I have 40 head of cattle wintering here," Zach explained as he helped her down from the wagon. 2 horses besides these. "It is just me now, though I hire hands in the spring and summer. Winter is quiet." Quiet, Delilah thought, might be an understatement. The isolation struck her immediately, the vast emptiness of the landscape broken only by the ranch buildings and the distant mountains. The nearest neighbor was 5 miles away, Zach had mentioned during the ride. The town was 8 miles, a journey that would be impossible during heavy snow. Inside, the house was surprisingly well maintained. The main room held a large stone fireplace, a worn sofa, a sturdy table with 4 chairs, and shelves lined with books. The kitchen was spacious, with a massive cast iron stove, a hand pump at the sink, and cabinets that appeared to be well stocked. "Your room is upstairs, first door on the right," Zach said, setting her bag down. "I am at the end of the hall. There is a spare room in between that I use for storage. The privy is out back, but I keep a chamber pot in each room for night and bad weather." He rubbed the back of his neck, clearly uncomfortable. "I know it is not what a lady is accustomed to. Mr. Anderson, I assure you this is far better than my recent accommodations." Delilah removed her coat, looking around with genuine appreciation. "When would you like me to begin?" "Tomorrow is soon enough. I have stew left from yesterday. It is not fancy, but it is hot." He moved toward the kitchen, then paused. "I should tell you I am not much for conversation. I have been alone a long time. If my silence bothers you, I apologize in advance." "Silence does not bother me," Delilah said softly. "I have had enough of empty words to last a lifetime." Something shifted in his expression, a flicker of understanding that made him seem less like a stranger. He nodded and went to tend the horses, leaving her to explore her new home. The room upstairs was simple but clean, with a bed covered in a patchwork quilt, a small dresser, a washstand, and a window that looked out over the valley. Delilah unpacked her few belongings, hanging her 2 dresses in the narrow closet, arranging her brush and mirror on the dresser. She had so little left from her old life. Thomas had sold or pawned most of their possessions before his death, leaving her to discover the wreckage only after he was gone. She sat on the bed, feeling the exhaustion of the long journey settle into her bones. Outside, the snow was falling harder now, coating the ground in white. Winter was coming, and she was here, in this isolated place with a man who was little more than a stranger. But she was warm, she was safe, and for the first time in months, she was not afraid of a knock on the door bringing more bad news. Dinner that evening was quiet. The stew was simple but hearty, and Zach had baked bread that was only slightly burned on the bottom. They ate by lamplight, the wind beginning to howl around the house, and Delilah found herself studying him when he was not looking. There was a loneliness about him that went deeper than mere solitude, a sadness in the set of his shoulders and the way he stared into his coffee cup, as though seeing things that were no longer there. "My brother and I had plans for this place," he said suddenly, startling her. "We were going to build it into something real. 1,000 head of cattle, enough horses to start breeding stock. Then Daniel got sick, and after he died, it seemed pointless to keep expanding." He looked up, meeting her eyes. "I kept the ranch going because it is all I have left of him, of the life we planned together. It is beautiful land," Delilah said gently. "I think your brother would be proud of what you have maintained." "Maybe." Zach stood, collecting the dishes. "You do not have to clean up tonight. Tomorrow you start earning your wages." The next morning, Delilah woke before dawn to the sound of Zach moving around downstairs. She dressed quickly in the cold air, braiding her dark blonde hair and pinning it up, then descended to find him building up the fire in the stove. "I usually eat around 6, he said. "Breakfast is simple. Eggs if the chickens are laying, bacon, bread, coffee. Dinner at noon is the main meal. Supper is lighter around 7. I can manage that." Delilah tied on an apron she found hanging by the kitchen. "Where do you keep the eggs?" He showed her the chicken coop, a well-insulated structure attached to the barn where a dozen hens clucked and fussed. She gathered 6 eggs, marveling at their warmth against her cold hands. Back in the kitchen, she found bacon hanging in the cold cellar, a massive supply that would last through the winter, along with potatoes, carrots, turnips, and onions. Shelves held jars of preserved vegetables and fruits, testament to someone's hard work during harvest time. "Did you put all this up yourself?" she asked as she sliced bacon. "Daniel's wife helped, the year before they both died. After that, I hired a woman from town to come out and help with the preserving. Mrs. Garcia. She is a good woman, but her husband does not like her traveling in winter. He poured coffee, the rich smell filling the kitchen. I have been making do with my own cooking for 2 years now. How have you survived? Delilah asked, then caught herself. I apologize, that was rude. It is accurate, I am a terrible cook. The corner of his mouth lifted slightly, not quite a smile, but close. I can keep from starving, but that is about it. Delilah served breakfast, pleased when Zach ate 3 helpings of the eggs she had scrambled with butter and herbs she found growing in a box by the window. The bacon was crispy, the bread toasted perfectly, and the coffee strong enough to wake the dead. This is good, Zach said, and though the words were simple, she could hear the genuine appreciation behind them. Really good. Wait until you taste my pot roast, Delilah replied, and was rewarded with that almost smile again. The days fell into a rhythm. Zach rose before dawn to tend the animals, checking on the cattle, making sure the horses had food and water, chopping wood, repairing fences, and handling the 100 small tasks that kept a ranch running through winter. Delilah took over the kitchen completely, cooking 3 meals a day, baking bread twice a week, making sure there was always coffee hot on the stove when Zach came in from the cold. The first major snowstorm hit in mid-December, dumping 3 feet of snow across the valley in 24 hours. Delilah woke to a world transformed, everything white and silent except for the wind. Zach was already up, dressed in heavy layers, preparing to go out. I have to check on the cattle, he said when she came downstairs. They should be in the near pasture, but I need to make sure none got separated. Could be gone most of the day. I will have hot food ready whenever you return, Delilah promised. She spent the morning cooking, making a thick beef stew with dumplings, baking fresh bread, preparing coffee that she kept warm. The house creaked and groaned under the assault of wind and snow, but the walls were solid, the fire kept burning, and she felt safe. Zach returned as darkness was falling, covered in snow, his face red from the cold and wind. Delilah had been watching from the window, worry growing as the hours passed, and she met him at the door with blankets. All safe, he said through chattering teeth. Had to dig 2 out of a drift, but they are all in the shelter now. Sit by the fire. I will bring you food and hot coffee. She helped him out of his frozen coat and boots, brought him blankets, then served him the stew. He ate slowly, warming from the inside out, and she noticed his hands were shaking slightly. You should not have stayed out so long, she said, unable to hide her concern. Could not leave them. Cattle are stupid, but they do not deserve to freeze. He looked at her over his coffee cup. Thank you for worrying. Of course I worried. If something happened to you, I would be stranded here. Is that the only reason? The question hung in the air between them, and Delilah felt her cheeks warm. No, she admitted. That is not the only reason. They looked at each other for a long moment, and Delilah saw something kindle in his eyes, something warm and alive that had not been there before. Then he nodded and returned to his stew, but the silence between them felt different now, charged with possibility. Christmas came quietly. Delilah made a special dinner, a roasted chicken with all the trimmings she could manage from their stores. She had found dried apples and made a pie, and though she had no gifts to give, she felt the need to mark the day somehow. Zach came in from his chores to find the table set with a cloth she had found and washed, candles burning despite it being wasteful, the house filled with the smell of roasting meat and baking pie. What is all this? He asked, stopping in the doorway. It is Christmas, Delilah said simply. We should acknowledge it. He nodded slowly, then went upstairs. When he returned, he had changed into clean clothes and had combed his hair back from his face. He looked younger somehow, less worn, and Delilah caught her breath at how handsome he actually was beneath the rough exterior. They ate by candlelight, and Zach told her stories about growing up in Missouri, about coming west with his brother to make their fortune, about the early days of the ranch when they lived in a tent and nearly froze the first winter. Delilah shared her own stories, carefully edited, about growing up in Pennsylvania, about her father who had been a teacher, about her love of books and music and things that seemed far away now. She did not talk about Thomas, and Zach did not press. But as the evening wore on and the candles burned low, he reached across the table and took her hand. "I am glad you are here," he said quietly. "I did not realize how lonely I was until I was not any more." Delilah's heart hammered in her chest. His hand was warm, rough with calluses, but his touch was gentle. "I am glad I am here too," she whispered. They sat together in the candlelight, holding hands across the table, and outside the snow began to fall again, soft and steady, covering the world in white. January brought bitter cold that made going outside an ordeal. Zach still tended the animals daily, but he stayed close to the barn and outbuildings, venturing no further than necessary. Delilah found herself watching for him from the window, counting the minutes until he returned, relief flooding through her when she saw him emerge from the barn and trudge through the snow toward the house. They spent the long evenings by the fire. Zach carved wood, his hands sure and steady as he shaped pieces of pine into useful things. A new spoon for the kitchen, a box with a fitted lid, a small horse that he set on the mantel without comment. Delilah sewed, mending his clothes, making herself a new apron from fabric she found in the storage room. "Did this belong to your brother's wife?" she asked, holding up the fabric. "Yes, her name was Catherine. She was kind like you." Zach set down his carving. "She wanted children badly. They were trying when she got sick. Daniel died first, then she went 3 days later. I think she died of heartbreak as much as the fever. That is terribly sad. It is why I stopped thinking about the future. Seemed safer to just get through each day." He looked at her directly. "But lately I have been thinking about the future again." Delilah set down her sewing. "What do you see when you think about it?" "I see this house full of life again. I see someone to talk to at dinner, someone to worry about me when I am out in the snow, someone to make the silence less empty." He paused. "I see you, Delilah. I see you staying." She could barely breathe. "Zach, I was hired just for the winter." "I know what you were hired for. I am asking for more than that." He stood, crossing to where she sat, then knelt beside her chair so they were at eye level. "I know it has not been long. I know you might not feel the same. But I have to tell you that somewhere between November and now, I fell in love with you. With the way you hum while you cook, and the way you watch for me at the window, and the way you understand silence but also know when words are needed. I love you and I want you to stay. Not as my cook, as my wife." Delilah's eyes filled with tears. "I was married before, Zach. It was not a happy marriage. Thomas was charming and exciting, but he was also careless and dishonest. He left me with nothing but debts and disappointment. I swore I would never trust another man. I am not asking you to trust me today. I am asking you to consider the possibility that maybe, with time, you could." His hand covered hers where it rested on the arm of the chair. "I will not rush you. I will not push, but I needed you to know how I feel." She looked into his eyes, those storm-gray eyes that had seemed so distant when she first arrived, and saw nothing but honesty and hope. This man who had been so lonely, who had closed himself off from the future, was opening his heart to her. "I think I have been falling in love with you too," she whispered. "I was afraid to admit it, even to myself. But when you are out in the cold, I count the minutes. When you smile, which is rare enough, I feel it like sunshine. When you told me about your brother and Catherine, I wanted to hold you and promise that life could be good again." The tears spilled over. "I am afraid, Zach. I am so afraid of making another mistake." He reached up and gently wiped her tears with his thumb. "Then we will be afraid together. But we will also be together, and that makes all the difference." She leaned forward and kissed him, a soft, gentle kiss that tasted of hope and new beginnings. He kissed her back with a tenderness that made her heart ache, his hand cradling her face like she was something precious. When they broke apart, he was smiling, a real, genuine smile that transformed his face. "Does that mean you will stay?" "Yes," Delilah said, laughing through her tears. "Yes, I will stay." They were married in February in Manassas. A simple ceremony at the small church with just the minister and his wife as witnesses. Delilah wore her best dress, dark blue with white lace at the collar, and Zach wore a suit that had belonged to his brother, altered to fit his broader shoulders. The snow was falling lightly as they spoke their vows, and when Zach kissed her as his wife, Delilah felt the last of her fear melt away. The trip back to the ranch was cold but beautiful, the whole world sparkling white under a pale blue sky. Zach kept his arm around her in the wagon, holding her close, and they talked about the spring to come, about the work that would need to be done, about the life they would build together. That night, in the house that was now truly theirs, Zach carried her over the threshold despite her laughing protests. He set her down gently in front of the fire, and the look in his eyes made her breath catch. "I love you, Delilah Anderson," he said softly. "I will spend every day of my life trying to deserve you." "You already deserve me," she replied, reaching up to touch his face. "You are everything Thomas was not. Honest, kind, steady. You make me feel safe and valued and loved." He kissed her then, deep and slow, and she kissed him back with all the passion she had been holding inside. They made love in front of the fire, tender and sweet, discovering each other with gentle hands and whispered words. And later, lying in his arms with the firelight dancing on the ceiling, Delilah thought about how strange life was, how losing everything had led her here to this moment, to this man. "What are you thinking?" Zach asked, his hand moving slowly up and down her back. "That I am happy," she said simply. "For the first time in years I am truly happy." He held her tighter. "Then that makes two of us." March brought the first hints of spring. The snow began to melt in earnest, revealing brown grass and muddy ground. The cattle moved out of their winter shelter into the open pastures, and Zach began talking about hiring hands for the spring branding and the drive up to the summer grazing lands. Delilah had settled into her role as his wife with surprising ease. She managed the house, tended the garden as the ground thawed, and worked beside him when extra hands were needed. She learned to milk the cow he bought in town, gathered eggs, and even helped with the cattle when necessary. Her hands grew rough with work, but she did not mind. This was honest labor, building something real. One evening in late March, as they sat together on the porch watching the sunset paint the mountains purple and gold, Zach took her hand. "I was thinking," he said slowly, "about expanding the herd like Daniel and I planned. About building this ranch into something substantial. Would you be agreeable to that? Of course. This is your dream, Zach. I want to help you achieve it." "It is our dream now," he corrected. "Everything I do for us, for the future we are building together." Delilah leaned her head on his shoulder. "Then yes, I am more than agreeable. Let us build something wonderful." They hired 3 ranch hands in April, young men from town who needed work and were willing to live in the bunkhouse Zach and Daniel had built years ago. Delilah found herself cooking for 5 instead of 2, but she did not mind. The ranch felt alive again, full of voices and activity. The spring branding was hard work. Delilah helped where she could, manning the fire, bringing water and food to the men. She watched Zach work, impressed by his skill and strength, the way he handled the cattle with firm competence. He was in his element, and seeing him happy and engaged made her heart swell with pride. One of the ranch hands, a boy of 19 named Peter, was thrown by a spooked horse and broke his arm badly. Delilah helped Zach set the bone and splint it, then nursed Peter through the worst of the pain. The young man looked at her with grateful eyes. "You are an angel, Mrs. Anderson," he said through gritted teeth. "I do not know what we would do without you." "You would manage," she said kindly, adjusting his sling, "but I am glad I can help." Later, Zach found her washing dishes and pulled her into his arms. "You were amazing today." Calm and capable, and exactly what Peter needed. "I was terrified I would hurt him more," Delilah admitted. "You did not let fear stop you from doing what needed to be done. That is bravery." He kissed her forehead. "I am proud of you." Those words, simple and sincere, meant more to Delilah than any flowery compliment. Zach was not a man who spoke without meaning, and knowing she had his respect and pride filled her with warmth. In May, Delilah realized she had missed her monthly courses twice. She said nothing at first, not wanting to build hopes on uncertainty, but by the end of the month there was no doubt. She was pregnant. She told Zach one evening after supper when they were alone on the porch watching the stars emerge. "I have news," she said, her heart pounding. "I am fairly certain I am carrying a child." Zach went very still. Then he turned to her, his eyes bright in the darkness. "Truly, truly. I think I am about 2 months along. The baby will come in late fall or early winter." He pulled her into his arms, holding her so tight she could barely breathe. "A baby," he whispered. "Our baby." "Are you happy?" she asked, though she could feel his answer in the way he held her. Happy does not begin to cover it. He pulled back to look at her face, his hands on her shoulders. "Delilah, you have given me everything. A reason to live again, a future to look forward to, and now a child. I do not have words for what I feel." "Then show me," she said softly, and he did, kissing her with a passion and tenderness that left her breathless. The summer passed in a haze of work and joy. Delilah's belly grew round, and Zach treated her like she was made of spun glass, despite her protests that she was perfectly capable of doing her regular work. He hired a woman from town, Mrs. Garcia, to come help with the heavier tasks, and Delilah found herself with a friend as well as help. "Your husband adores you," Mrs. Garcia said one day as they preserved vegetables from the thriving garden. "I can see it in how he looks at you, how he speaks about you when you are not around." "I adore him too," Delilah admitted. "I never thought I could be this happy. My first marriage was difficult, and I believed I was not meant for happiness in love." "Some men are not worthy of a good woman's love," Mrs. Garcia said wisely. "But your Zach is a good man. Hold on to him." "I intend to," Delilah replied, smiling. In August, a letter arrived from Denver. Delilah opened it with shaking hands, recognizing the attorney's name from the return address. It was about Thomas's debts. She read through the legal language, her heart sinking, until she reached the final paragraph. The creditors had accepted a settlement from Thomas's brother, whom Delilah had not even known existed. The debts were paid, and she was free and clear of any further obligation. She sat down hard, the letter fluttering to the floor. It was over. The last shadow from her past was gone. Zach found her there, tears streaming down her face. "Delilah, what happened? Is it the baby?" "No, no, the baby is fine." She handed him the letter. "Read it." He did, and his expression softened. "You are free of it all." "I did not realize how much it still worried me, buried deep down. What if they found me? What if they came after the ranch because I am your wife now? But it is over, Zach. It is finally over. He pulled her up and held her close, his hand on her rounded belly. Nothing is going to threaten what we have. I promise you that. And she believed him, believed in the strength of his arms and the steadiness of his love. The baby came in November, 3 days of labor that left Delilah exhausted but exhilarated. Mrs. Garcia and the doctor from town attended the birth, and Zach paced downstairs, wearing a path in the floor with his worry. When the baby's cry finally split the air, he took the stairs 3 at a time. Delilah lay in bed, pale and tired but smiling, a tiny bundle in her arms. "Come meet your son," she said softly. Zach approached as if walking on sacred ground. He looked down at the red-faced, squalling infant and his eyes filled with tears. "A son," he breathed. "We have a son." "Would you like to hold him?" Delilah asked. Carefully, awkwardly, Zach took the baby, cradling him against his broad chest. The infant quieted immediately, seeming to sense safety in his father's arms. Zach looked at Delilah, tears streaming down his face. "What should we name him?" he asked. "I was thinking Daniel, after your brother, if that would be acceptable to you." Zach's face crumpled and he sat on the edge of the bed, the baby still in his arms. "Daniel," he whispered. "Yes, Daniel Zachary Anderson." He leaned over and kissed Delilah softly. "Thank you." "For him, for everything, for giving me back my life." "We gave each other back our lives," Delilah replied, touching her son's soft cheek. "We saved each other." Winter settled over the ranch again, but this time the house was not quiet. Baby Daniel cried and cooed, keeping them awake at all hours, but neither Delilah nor Zach minded. They took turns walking the floor with him, singing lullabies, marveling at his tiny hands and feet. "He has your eyes," Delilah said one night, nursing the baby by firelight. "He has your chin," Zach replied, watching them with an expression of such love it made Delilah's heart overflow. The years that followed were good ones. The ranch prospered, growing from 40 head of cattle to 200, then 500. Zach and Delilah worked side by side, building the dream that he and Daniel had started. They hired more hands, built a second barn, expanded the house. 2 years after Daniel was born, Delilah gave birth to a daughter they named Rose, a beautiful child with her mother's blonde hair and her father's gray eyes. 3 years after that came twin boys, Gabriel and Samuel, who turned the household into chaos but also filled it with laughter. Through it all, Zach and Delilah's love deepened. They had their disagreements, of course, small arguments about money or how to discipline the children or whether to expand the cattle operation further north. But they always talked through their problems, always went to bed reconciled, and their respect and affection for each other only grew stronger with time. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Zach took Delilah into town to the small hotel, leaving the children with Mrs. Garcia, who had become like family over the years. They had dinner in the hotel restaurant, a rare luxury, and Zach gave her a gold locket with a picture of their 4 children inside. "I wanted to give you something to mark the occasion," he said, fastening it around her neck. 10 years ago, I placed an advertisement for a cook, thinking I just needed someone to make sure I did not starve to death over the winter. Instead, I found the love of my life." Delilah touched the locket, tears in her eyes. "I came here running from my past, looking for a place to hide until I could figure out what to do next. Instead, I found a home, a purpose, and a man who loves me the way I always dreamed of being loved." "I cannot imagine my life without you," Zach said, taking her hand across the table. "You turned my house into a home, my existence into a life. You gave me children and laughter and reasons to wake up happy every morning. You are everything to me, Delilah." "And you are everything to me," she replied. My refuge, my partner, my greatest love." They kissed across the table, and the other diners smiled at the obvious affection between them. That night in the hotel room, they made love like they had in the early days, slow and tender, relearning each other's bodies, whispering words of love and commitment. And in the morning, they went home to their children and their ranch, and the life they had built together. The seasons continued their cycle. Spring brandings and summer grazing, fall roundups and winter quiet. Daniel grew into a serious boy who loved books and the outdoors equally, already showing signs of being a thoughtful, capable young man. Rose was all sunshine and energy, singing constantly, making friends with every person and animal she met. The twins were mischievous and inseparable, keeping Delilah and Zach on their toes. On a particularly beautiful spring day when Daniel was 12, Rose was 10, and the twins were 7, the family took a picnic up into the hills overlooking the ranch. They spread blankets in the grass, ate the food Delilah had packed, and watched the cattle grazing in the distance. "Tell us the story again," Rose demanded, snuggling against her mother. "About how you and Papa met." Delilah looked at Zach, who smiled and nodded. She had told this story dozens of times, but the children never tired of it. "Your father was lonely," she began. "He lived all by himself in a big house, working hard every day but with no one to share his life with. He placed an advertisement in the newspaper for a cook, and I answered it because I needed a job and a place to stay." "And you fell in love at first sight," Rose said dramatically. "Not quite at first sight," Delilah corrected gently. "At first, we were just two people who happened to be sharing a house. But over the winter, as we talked and worked together and got to know each other, we became friends. And then we became more than friends. Papa was scared to tell you he loved you," Daniel added. He had heard this story often enough to have it memorized. "I was terrified," Zach confirmed, pulling young Samuel onto his lap. "I thought she would think I was crazy, falling in love with her so quickly, but I could not help it. Your mother was and is the most amazing woman I have ever known." "And Mama was scared too," Gabriel piped up, "because her first husband was mean." Delilah winced slightly. They had told the children an edited version of her first marriage, just enough so they understood why she had been alone and struggling. "He was not mean exactly, but he was not a good husband, so I was afraid to trust again. But your father showed me day by day that he was worthy of my trust. He was patient and kind and honest, and I fell in love with him too." "And then you got married and had us," Rose finished happily. "And then we got married and had you," Delilah agreed, pulling her daughter close. "And we lived happily ever after." "Are you happy, Mama?" Rose asked, looking up at her with serious eyes. "I am more than happy, sweetheart. I am blessed. I have a husband I love, 4 beautiful children, and a life I never dreamed I could have." She looked at Zach over their children's heads. "I have everything I ever wanted." "So do I," Zach said softly, and the love in his eyes was as strong as it had been that first winter when he knelt beside her chair and asked her to stay. The years continued to pass, bringing changes and challenges, but also joy and growth. The ranch became one of the most successful in the valley. Young Daniel went to college in Denver, studying agriculture so he could bring new knowledge back to the family operation. Rose grew into a beautiful young woman who married the son of a neighboring rancher, though they stayed close by. The twins took over much of the day-to-day running of the ranch as Zach and Delilah grew older. On their 25th wedding anniversary, the family gathered at the ranch for a celebration. There were grandchildren now, 3 from Rose and her husband, and the house rang with laughter and life. They roasted a whole steer, and Mrs. Garcia, now an old woman but still sharp as ever, made her famous tamales. The entire community came, Neighbors from miles around, ranch hands past and present, friends from town. As the sun set and the dancing began, Zach led Delilah away from the crowd to the porch where they had spent so many evenings together over the years. They sat in the same rocking chairs, now worn smooth by decades of use, and watched their family and friends celebrate. 25 years, Delilah mused. It seems like yesterday and also like forever. I remember the day you arrived, Zach said, taking her hand. You stood outside the general store looking so brave and so scared at the same time. I thought you were the prettiest thing I had ever seen, but I was too much of a coward to say so. I remember thinking you were very stern and serious. I was afraid you would be difficult to work for. Delilah laughed. Little did I know I would fall hopelessly in love with you. Best decision I ever made, placing that advertisement. Though I am fairly certain Mrs. Garcia had a hand in it. She kept nagging me to find a wife, said it was not natural for a man to live alone. I told her I was hiring a cook, not looking for a wife, but she just smiled that knowing smile of hers. She knew before we did, Delilah agreed. She told me once that she could see the way you looked at me, even in those early days. She said you looked at me like I was water and you had been dying of thirst. Zach lifted her hand to his lips, kissing it gently. That is exactly how it felt. I had been going through the motions of living, but I was not truly alive. Not until you came. You woke me up, Delilah. You made me want to be better, do more, build something lasting. You gave me purpose and joy and love. You gave me everything. We gave each other everything, Delilah corrected, just as she had all those years ago when Daniel was born. That is what true partnership is. Not one person saving another, but two people choosing to walk through life together, supporting each other, loving each other, building something neither could have created alone. They sat in comfortable silence, watching the stars emerge one by one in the darkening sky. Music and laughter drifted from the party, and somewhere in the crowd were their children and grandchildren, the legacy of their love. You ever think about how different your life would have been if you had not answered that advertisement? Zach asked. Delilah considered the question. Sometimes. I might have found work elsewhere, maybe remarried eventually, but I cannot imagine it would have been like this. This life, this love, this family, you, it all feels like it was meant to be. Like every hard thing I went through before was leading me here to you to this moment. I feel the same way, Zach admitted. Losing Daniel nearly broke me. I thought I would spend the rest of my life alone, just surviving until I died. But then you came, and slowly, so slowly I barely noticed at first, you healed me. You showed me that life could be good again, that love was worth the risk of loss, that the future could be bright instead of empty. We healed each other, Delilah said firmly. I was just as broken as you were, Zach. Maybe more so, because my wounds were inflicted by someone who was supposed to love me. You taught me what real love looks like, patient and kind and steadfast. You never tried to change me or control me. You just loved me, exactly as I was, and that made me want to be the best version of myself. Young Daniel appeared on the porch, now a man of 27, tall and strong like his father. Papa, Mama, everyone is asking for you. They want to toast the happy couple. Zach and Delilah stood, still holding hands, and followed their son back to the party. The crowd gathered around them, raising glasses of punch and whiskey. To Zach and Delilah, the minister from town called out. 25 years of marriage, a testament to faith, hard work, and enduring love. May you have 25 more. 25 more, the crowd echoed, drinking deeply. Zach pulled Delilah close, kissing her in front of everyone, and the crowd cheered and whistled. She kissed him back, tasting whiskey and happiness, feeling the solid strength of him against her. I love you, he whispered against her lips. Today, tomorrow, always. Always, she agreed, and meant it with every fiber of her being. The party went on late into the night, but eventually the guests departed, the grandchildren were put to bed, and the house grew quiet. Zach and Delilah climbed the stairs to their room, the same room Delilah had slept in that first night all those years ago. They had expanded it over the years, adding space and comfort, but it was still fundamentally the same, overlooking the valley that had become home. They undressed slowly, tiredly, and climbed into bed. Zach pulled Delilah against him, her back to his chest, his arm around her waist, the same position they had slept in for 25 years. "Thank you for saying yes," he murmured into her hair. "That night when I asked you to stay, I was so afraid you would say no." "I was afraid too," Delilah admitted. "Afraid of being hurt again, afraid of trusting the wrong person. But I am so glad I took the risk. This life we have built, this love we share, it is worth every moment of fear." They lay in silence, listening to the sounds of the house settling, the distant call of an owl, the rustle of wind in the trees. Outside, the stars wheeled slowly across the sky, marking time that seemed both infinite and fleeting. "What do you think happens next?" Delilah asked. "We are getting older, Zach. The children are grown, the ranch is established. What adventures are left for us? Watching our grandchildren grow, teaching them what we know, enjoying the fruits of our labor," Zach replied. "Traveling, maybe, if you would like. We could go to Denver, or even back east to Pennsylvania so you could see where you grew up. We could take that trip to California we have always talked about." He paused. "But mostly, I think the adventure is in continuing to love each other day by day, through whatever comes." "That is enough for me." "It is enough for me too," Delilah agreed, turning in his arms so she could see his face in the moonlight filtering through the window. "More than enough. You are more than enough, Zach Anderson. You always have been." He kissed her then, slow and sweet, a kiss that held 25 years of love and the promise of whatever time they had left. When they broke apart, Delilah settled back against his chest, his heart beat steady beneath her ear. "Sleep now," Zach murmured. "Tomorrow we start the next chapter." "Together," Delilah whispered. "Always together," he confirmed. And as sleep claimed them, wrapped in each other's arms in the house they had made a home, Delilah reflected on the strange journey that had brought her here. She had answered a simple advertisement for a cook needed for the winter, expecting a few months of work and nothing more. Instead, she had found a life, a love, and a man who had shown her what it meant to be truly cherished. The lonely rancher had hired her to cook for winter, and by spring he could not imagine her ever leaving. But the truth was, she could not imagine leaving either. This ranch, this man, this life, it had all become part of her, woven into her soul so deeply that she could not tell where she ended and it began. They had taken their broken pieces and built something beautiful together. They had faced hardships and triumphs, raised children, built a legacy, and through it all, their love had been the foundation that held everything together. As the years continued to pass, that foundation only grew stronger. They aged together gracefully, silver threading through hair that had once been dark, wrinkles deepening around eyes that still sparkled when they looked at each other. Their children's children had children, and the ranch passed from Zach and Delilah to Daniel, who ran it with the same care and dedication his father had. On their 50th wedding anniversary, they gathered the family again, though it was a quieter celebration this time. Zach's joints ached with arthritis, and Delilah moved more slowly, but their minds were sharp and their love was undimmed. They sat together on the porch in the same rocking chairs, now ancient and creaking, holding hands and watching the sunset paint the mountains in shades of gold and rose. The valley spread before them, green and beautiful, dotted with cattle bearing the Anderson brand. 50 years, Delilah marveled. Half a century since that day in the church when we promised to love each other forever. Best decision I ever made, Zach said, squeezing her hand. Every single day with you has been a gift. Even the hard days, Delilah asked with a slight smile. Especially the hard days, Zach replied. Because even when things were difficult, we faced them together. That made all the difference. They sat in comfortable silence as the sun sank lower, the sky blazing with color. Somewhere in the house, their great-grandchildren were playing, their laughter floating on the evening air. Rose and her husband lived on the neighboring ranch, and the twins had started their own spread to the north, but everyone had come home for this celebration. You have any regrets? Delilah asked suddenly. Zach thought about it carefully before answering. I regret that Daniel and Catherine did not live to see what we built. I think they would have been proud. I regret that we could not give our children an easier start in life, that they had to work as hard as we did. But those are small regrets, Delilah. The big picture, our life together, I would not change a single thing. Every joy, every sorrow, every challenge and triumph, they all brought us here to this moment, and I am grateful for all of it. I feel the same way, Delilah said softly. Even my first marriage, as painful as it was, led me to you. I would not change it because then I might not have been in Denver that day, might not have seen your advertisement, might not have come to this ranch and found my home. Do you ever miss it? Zach asked. The city, the excitement, the culture and refinement you gave up to be here, Delilah laughed. Are you asking me if I regret marrying a rancher and living in the middle of nowhere? Something like that. She turned to him, her eyes, still bright despite their age, looking directly into his. Zach Anderson, I have never regretted a single moment of our life together. This ranch is not nowhere, it is home. The excitement I found here, in building a life with you, in raising our children, in being part of this community, is more real and satisfying than any opera or ball I might have attended in Denver. And as for refinement, she smiled, I have found more refinement in your honest heart than I ever found in so-called polite society. You are the best man I have ever known, and loving you has been the greatest privilege of my life. Tears ran down Zach's weathered face. I do not deserve you. Yes, you do. You deserve all the love and happiness in the world, and I am honored that I got to be the one to give it to you. She leaned over, careful of her aching joints, and kissed him gently. We deserve each other, Zach. Two broken people who found each other and became whole. As the last light faded from the sky and the stars began to emerge, their children came to help them inside. Daniel took his father's arm and Rose took her mother's, and together they walked into the warm, brightly lit house full of family and love. That night in their bed, Zach and Delilah held each other close as they had for 50 years. They spoke little, words no longer necessary after so much time together, but the love between them was palpable, a living thing that filled the room. Thank you, Zach whispered finally, for everything. For taking a chance on a lonely rancher, for staying when the winter ended, for building this beautiful life with me. Thank you, Delilah. Thank you for seeing me, Delilah replied. Not the person I was trying to be or the person I thought I should be, but the person I actually was. Thank you for loving all of me, even the broken parts. Thank you for giving me a home and a family and a love I never thought I would find. Thank you, Zach. They kissed one final time, a kiss that held 50 years of love, and then they slept, wrapped in each other's arms as the stars wheeled overhead and the ranch settled into nighttime quiet. The years that followed were gentle. Zach and Delilah slowed down considerably, spending their days in simple pleasures, tending a small garden, reading together in the evenings, playing with their great-grandchildren, and watching the ranch continue to thrive under Daniel's capable management. They took short walks around the property when weather permitted, Zach's arm around Delilah's waist, supporting each other as they always had. Zach passed away peacefully in his sleep at the age of 87, Delilah beside him as she had been every night for 53 years. She woke to find him gone, his face peaceful, his hand still holding hers. The grief was crushing, but it was also mixed with gratitude for every moment they had shared. At his funeral, the church overflowed with people whose lives Zach had touched. Ranchers and townspeople, ranch hands who had worked for him over the decades, neighbors and friends, all came to pay their respects. Delilah stood straight and strong, surrounded by her children and grandchildren, and spoke about the man she had loved. Zach was not a man of many words, she said, her voice steady despite her tears. But his actions spoke volumes. He was kind, honest, hardworking, and devoted to his family and his community. He taught our children by example what it meant to be honorable and good. He showed me what true love looks like, patient, steadfast, and unconditional. I was blessed beyond measure to spend my life with him, and though my heart is broken now, I would not trade a single moment of the time we had together. He was and always will be the love of my life. Delilah lived for 3 more years, staying in the house she and Zach had built together, surrounded by family. She told stories to her great-grandchildren about the ranch's early days, about their great-grandfather's kindness and strength, about the love that had sustained her through all the years. She was peaceful and content, knowing that she had lived a full and beautiful life. On a spring morning, with wildflowers blooming in the meadows and the mountains standing sentinel in the distance, Delilah passed away quietly in her sleep. She was 84 years old. Her children found her in her bed, a slight smile on her face, holding the gold locket Zach had given her on their 10th anniversary, containing pictures of their 4 children. They buried her beside Zach on a hillside overlooking the ranch, with a simple headstone that read, "Delilah Anderson, beloved wife, mother, and grandmother. She turned a house into a home and filled our lives with love." At the funeral, young Daniel, now a man in his 50s with silver in his hair, spoke about his parents. "My father was lonely until my mother came," he said. "He hired her to cook for winter, but by spring he could not imagine her ever leaving, and she did not leave. She stayed and built a life with him, a life of love and hard work and dedication. They showed all of us what marriage should be: partnership, respect, devotion, and joy. The legacy they left is not just this ranch, though it is substantial. Their legacy is the love that still surrounds us, the values they instilled, and the example they set. They proved that 2 broken people could find each other and create something whole and beautiful. I am grateful every day that they found each other, because without their love, none of us would be here." The family gathered after the service at the ranch house, now over 70 years old but still standing strong. They told stories and shared memories, celebrating the lives of Zach and Delilah and the love that had created their family. The house was full of laughter and tears, exactly as Delilah would have wanted it. As evening fell and the family began to depart, young Daniel stood on the porch with his own children and grandchildren, looking out over the valley that 3 generations of Andersons had called home. He thought about his parents, about their courage in choosing love after loss, about the life they had built from almost nothing. "Grandfather always said that grandmother saved him," his daughter said, standing beside him, "but I think they saved each other." "They did," Daniel agreed. "They absolutely did." And as the stars emerged one by one in the darkening sky, the ranch settled into peaceful quiet, a monument to the love of two people who had found each other against all odds and built something lasting. The lonely rancher and the woman he hired to cook for winter had created a legacy that would endure for generations, a testament to the power of love, perseverance, and the courage to open your heart even when it has been broken. Their story, which had begun with a simple advertisement in a Denver newspaper in the autumn of 1884, had become the foundation of everything that followed. It was a story of loneliness conquered, of trust rebuilt, of two wounded souls finding healing in each other's arms. It was a story of hard work and dedication, of raising a family and building a community, of facing challenges together and celebrating triumphs as one. But most of all, it was a love story. The kind of love that transforms lives, that makes every day brighter, that gives meaning and purpose to existence. The kind of love that lasts beyond death, living on in the children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren who carry forward the values and the legacy of those who came before. Zach and Delilah Anderson had loved each other through 53 years of marriage, through joy and sorrow, through abundance and hardship, through every season of life. And that love, pure and true and enduring, was the greatest gift they gave to each other and to the world. The ranch continued to thrive, passing from generation to generation, but it was always known as Zach and Delilah's place, the home built by love and sustained by devotion. And on quiet spring evenings, when the mountains were painted gold by the setting sun and the wind whispered through the grass, it seemed that you could still feel their presence there. Two souls intertwined for eternity, forever watching over the land and the family they had created together. Their story ended not with death, but with legacy. Every child born into the Anderson family carried their blood and their spirit. Every value they held dear was passed down through the generations. Every act of kindness, every moment of hard work, every expression of love could be traced back to that winter in 1884 when a lonely rancher hired a desperate woman to cook for him. And they found in each other not just companionship, but the truest, deepest love imaginable. And so the story concluded not with an ending, but with continuation, the eternal ripples of a love so strong that it could not be contained by a single lifetime but spread outward, touching countless lives, creating beauty and joy wherever it reached. Zach and Delilah were gone, but their love remained, an enduring testament to the transformative power of choosing to open your heart, to take a chance on happiness, and to build a life with someone who sees you, truly sees you, and loves you exactly as you are. In the end, it was the perfect love story. Not perfect because it was without challenges or sorrow, but perfect because it was real and true and lasting. Perfect because two people chose each other every single day for 53 years. Perfect because the love they created together was stronger than fear, deeper than loss, and more enduring than time itself. And that, truly, is what happily ever after means.